All right, man. So let's start today's topic. It's about three-bet pot barreling turns. Last month, we talked about three-bet pot fundamentals, where we talk about approaching flops, how to construct a pretty solid strategy on different type of board textures and different positions as well. Today's topic is barreling turns, and just one second. So we're going to try to, basically the goals of today's coaching is going to be having a better understanding on approaching betting the turn, build a solid thought process, and also understand some general concepts that can be easily applied in game. So what we're going to see is that a lot of you guys, I saw some posts in the forum that even some of our Love the Spot student that I coach are always asking questions and think that barreling turn is more complicated than it actually is, because what we're going to see is that we're going to take a look at a couple different situations, but what we're going to see is basically like it approaches different situation with like the kind of the same way. So like there's a lot of concepts that we're going to take a look at that not only applies in this specific situation, but also applies in many different situations as well. So it's not like we have to learn like 50 different turn strategies. Once we understand like those important concepts, basically like those concepts can be applied in many other situations as well, which makes things less and less difficult. So what are we going to be covering today? We'll be focusing on the situation where we c-bet our entire range on the flop and we are looking to whether barrel turn or not. So we're not going to be looking into mixed strategies. Spoiler alert, we're going to be taking a look into the checking part into next month. So I decided to do a two-part, so that way maybe the webinars doesn't last like 4.5 hours. So and we get to also split it in two coaching. So today is really going to be, we c-bet our entire range, whether it's 1/3 or 1/4 pot on the flop or 50% pot. And then we are actually having a decision whether we want to be betting the turn or not betting the turn. We're going to take a look at some general concepts. We're also going to be talking about turn sizings, which is the very next topic. All different turn cards affects both ranges. Some GTO versus exploitative, what to keep in mind when barreling. So what I mean by that is that, yes, we want to understand like concepts of how we should be approaching turn, but also we're going to be talking about like how we should be approaching the population in general. So like what type of adjustments we can make compared to like how solver would play and all that. I mean, there's some stuff that we really need to be changing, because if we try to play like Pio or like, I don't know, simple post flop or whatever it is, we're just going to be making huge mistakes versus the pool. Yeah, guys, make sure that you close your webcams, please. All right. There was also going to be a quiz portion and history from lab members as well. Let me just take a look at Georgios is asking, in order to simplify things, should we use only one size on the turn? Yes, I would suggest doing that. We're also going to be talking a bit about the river today, but in a really specific situation that I think is important that we talk about. So now let's get things going. All right, some general concepts. What is one? So this is a question for you guys. Basically, what is one very common concept in many situations that we c-bet our entire range on the flop? On, for example, on a high board like ace, eight, deuce, rainbow, and now we're looking to bet the turn or check the turn. Polar on the turn, yes. Check a lot on the turn. Set up river jam, okay. Yeah, basically you guys pretty much nailed it, in the sense that like once we c-bet at a really high frequency on the flop, in general, like if you take a look at a sim, right? it's like on a board like ace eight deuce, it can potentially be c-betting like in the original sim, something like 70 to 80% of the time, maybe more, but in some situation it's c-betting like anywhere from 70 to 80%, for example. And then we just basically simplify it by betting range, because versus that strategy, people will be overfolding, not raising enough. And then the second thing that happens is that it also simplifies our strategy. But what happens is that if villain overfolds, and even if he doesn't overfold, we're going to have c-bet our entire range on the flop. That means that we get to the turn with our entire betting range, that either it was a single raise pot or a 3-bet pot. We get that to the turn, and villain will have folded some hands, so he gets to the turn with a stronger range. That means that especially on the high boards, we're going to be very polarized. We're going to do a lot of checking, and we're going to use a big sizing with a really polarized range. I mean, when I say really polarized range, I mean we're just going to be pretty polarized. We're going to be more polarized than if the board is lower, for example. We're also going to be taking a look into that a bit later. But yes, I think a lot of people doesn't check enough in 3-bet pots. Also, if you know that like villain is way overfolding, and I mean, that means that, let's say in the sim, it checks, I don't know, 50% of the time on the turn. If he's overfolding, that means he's going to have a tighter range than he should. So that means we're going to have to do a lot more checking as well. Okay, yeah, so I think this is where a lot of people make quite a bit of mistakes. I think at this day and age of poker, a lot of people know that using a high frequency bet in these type of situation is the right approach, but they get kind of lost on what to do on the turn. Georgios, this is basically the answer to your question. I would suggest to stick to one sizing for your entire betting range on the turn. Of course, if we are playing against a recreational, then we play our hand and we basically bet the sizing that our actual hand wants to bet. So after betting our entire range on the flop, we will be betting a polarized range on the turn with a big sizing. All right, so now what I wanted to talk about first is turn sizing. So basically how we should be approaching, and I mean, this is going to be like a general like approach. So basically at 100 big blind, after betting range for 25 to 33% size, we can be betting anywhere from 50% to 75%. But in general, somewhere like 60% is a pretty solid sizing. I'll get to the reason why we can bet anywhere, and we should change our bet sizes on the turn as well, depending on some factors. Once we bet range for 50% size, we can also bet anywhere from 50 to 75%, but I would stick with something like 50%. So if I'm going like 1/3 on the flop, I go something like 60% on the turn and then jam river. And then if I'm betting something like 50% size on the flop, I kind of like going again 50% on the turn, because like the pot is already bigger. So using the 50-50 and then jam, I think is totally fine. And it makes a lot of sense. Now the turn sizing, even at 100 big blind, it will still be affected on how wet the board is. So now let's take a look into an example. So button opens, we 3-bet from the small blind and the button calls. The board is ace 8 deuce rainbow, and we see bet range for 25% pot. So on the deuce of spade turn, which brings, I mean, no backdoor flush draw, it's pretty much like the brickiest of the brickiest turn. The board is super dry and the equity is super, super stable. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that we're going to be betting like hands like sevens and stuff like that. The only thing I wanted to say is that we're still going to be betting a polarized range. So we're still going to be betting like a strong top pair or better, but we can use a small sizing with our polarized range. So instead of going like 75%, where since the board is like so dry, we just give villain a very easy way out once we start betting pretty big there on such a dry board. So using something like a 50 to 55% size on the turn, And still using a polarized range, I think makes a lot of sense, because using a smaller size, we kind of put all of his like medium strength hand into a really, really tough spot. Like take a look for it. Like just think about if you were to bet like 85% pot, like how easy it is to just fold with like any pair you have. If you bet something like 50, 55%, now you kind of put like a lot of his medium strength hand into a really tough spot. So we don't give villain an easy way out by betting big for no reason. This is why I just mentioned that I put anywhere from 50 to 75%. Yeah, now let's take a look into another situation where the board is ace of diamond, eight of diamond, deuce of spades. So there's a flush draw on the board. We see bet our entire range for a quarter pot or 1/3 pot. And now the turn is the five of spade. As you guys can see now, the board is, I mean, in terms of straight draws, it's still pretty safe, but it's much different because now there are two flush draws present. So even though we are 100 big blinds, now I would adjust my turn sizing compared to the other board where on the other board, I would bet something like 50% pot. On this board, since there are two flush draws, we want to use a bigger size. So I would pick something like 70 to 80% pot, something on the bigger side of, on the bigger side, just because, I mean, we want to be charging the draws right now. And it's okay if, let's say on this example, right, where it's rainbow and it's super dry, it's okay for us to leave ourselves a bigger SPR on the river, because on the turn, I mean, we don't need to protect from anything. So using a slightly smaller size where we might leave ourselves with like a pot size bet on the river or something close to it, is totally fine because the board is super dry. Now on that specific board, when there's two flush draws out there, it's fine to bet bigger on the turn because we want to charge the draws on the turn and we leave ourselves a smaller SPR on the river. All right, let's just take a look to some questions. Amar is saying, isn't 50% pot size bet on the turn too small because we want to set up a river shove? I mean, I would just pick a sizing that would leave like a bigger SPR on the river. So, I mean, it could be 50%, it could be 55%, 60%. As long as you pick a sizing that you still put, like, I think if we went smaller than that, I think that's too small, because now we're going to have to like overbet jam the river, which is not great. But I would try to like leave myself with like maybe just a slightly under pot size bet on the river, or even a pot size bet on such a dry board. I think that's totally fine. So like, it's like I'm saying 50%, but it's just for you guys to keep in mind that we can adjust our turn sizing depending on how dry or how wet the board is on the turn. Andre Ham is asking, villain shove, do you call with top pair in this case? I mean, the thing is that it depends on a lot of the, like, it depends on the player. I mean, if I have like a ace king, ace queen, I'm probably never folding there. No, since, I mean, there's many draws that he can have. Yes, I mean, he can have better hands, but yeah. Johnny said, for boards where we are polar on the flop, are we betting turn at a higher frequency? I mean, this is the topic for the next webinar that we're going to be covering. We do tend to be betting a bit higher frequency because our range is a bit more polarized on the flop. So there's less hands that wants to check on the turn. But yes, I mean, today we're going to be focusing in situations where we actually see bet range on the flop. When betting 50%-ish on the turn on polar, we're basically playing the same strategy. It's not because we're like, let's say betting like 55 instead of like 80%. Pot that we're just going to be betting way more. I mean, that's not what I want to say. We're still polarized to like a strong top pair or better, something like ace 10, ace jack plus or close to it. But we just adjust our sizings just because the board is super, super dry. So like hands like ace deuce, ace three. I mean, ace deuce is two pair, but like ace three, ace four, like ace six, ace seven, like all goes in the checking range. We're going to be talking about the bluffing region, BTS G 3-bet pot. Stefan is asking, but doing so we cannot basically ever bluff, right? Because if I turn c-bet, he calls top range, right? I mean, we're gonna have to adjust, yes, because people do overfold the flop, do overfold the turn, so they get to the river with a pretty strong range. But when there's two flush draws, I don't expect them to be folding a bunch of flush draws. They're still gonna have hands that has a pair, gut shot plus flush draw that they're not folding. Yes, it's gonna also have overpairs. Okay, we're focusing on 3-bet pot today, Duong, sorry. What's up, Mattia? Mattia is saying, when getting to the turn with draw bluff combos, how do you decide which combos go into betting range and which combo goes into checking range? Which ones are bad enough to bet fold, which are bet called, and then which ones don't? We're going to be talking all about that a bit later, so I'm not going to be spending too much time here. We're really going to be talking about how we should be approaching with all types of different hands in different situations. Gecko is asking, is it possible to bet 1/3 with ace-x weak and KK queens? Yes, I mean, in poker, everything is possible. I mean, it's no limit hold'em. You can do whatever you want. The thing is that, like, you have to think about your entire range. What are you like? Those hands cannot go for two streets of value. So it's not like you're going to be blocking kings or queens and then be betting again on the river. I mean, that's going to be way too thin. So instead of that, and instead of mixing two sizings on the turn, which first of all will leave your checking range a bit face up, because you're going to put more good hands to check, like weak ace-x, into another sizing betting range on the turn. That means that your checking range will be quite weak, because those hands goes really well into the checking range. So I mean, if you're playing against a weak player or recreational, I mean, you can do basically whatever you want. I would suggest just checking a lot, putting those hands into a check, and then you can bet small on the river as well. I mean, it's not like you can just like check. I mean, you can still get one street with a weak ace-x as well, but I mean, I would just do it on the river instead of the turn. I found myself putting a lot of nut flush draws or combo draws to my checking range, but betting more gut shot type of stuff. Yeah, I mean, you do want to be betting hands that don't mind bet folding, and then the hands that really hate bet folding usually goes in the checking range. But out of position, I mean, it's a bit different. That's mostly in position, because when you're out of position and you have a 9-high flush draw, it's not like you can just check call. So even if you bet the turn and then you get raised off your equity, it sucks. But I mean, it's not like we can just check call the turn and then just win the pot with 9-high. So when you're in position, that's a bit more true. Mike Pearson is asking, do we assume people are barreling turns too aggressively? And if so, does that mean we should be aggro wider than Pio shove, raising turns in 3-bet pots? I think people will be under bluffing significantly rivers. So there's a lot of slow playing going on when you take a look at solvers, because like slow playing a hand on the turn when like villain will be bluffing quite a lot on the river, I mean, it makes some sense. If you think that people, especially out of position, you know, they will be betting as a bluff on the turn, and then unimproved, they're always going to be checking back river. I mean, now you don't really want to be slow playing against those guys, because whenever he makes a hand like a flush, like a straight, or whatever it is, or a set or whatever, you always pay him off. And then whenever he bricks his draws or whatever the hand he had, we never get any more money. So when out of position against those guys, I tend to do a bit more fast playing. If you think that villain is super aggressive, then we can do a bit more. Calling, but I mean it's really player dependent. Rodrigo, let's just take a look at like a couple other questions and then we can continue. Rodrigo is asking, you were a pro baseball player? Yes, I was. I was drafted by the Oakland Athletics as a pitcher. Chris, the sizing will change if deeper. Yes, but I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that a bit later. And yes, Mattia, the screaming goat is still well alive. You can hear it if you want. Yeah, so that was it. All right, guys. So let's continue. All right. Yeah, guys, just for those who doesn't know, like I have a little screaming goat where like when I get cooler, then I feel kind of not angry, but I feel bothered by a hand. I just click on that screaming goat and it just makes me feel better. Yeah. All right, so let's continue. So yeah, so when board is very dry, it is okay to bet on the smaller side on the turn in order to leave a bigger SPR on the river. On the other end, when the board is very wet, it is okay to bet on the bigger side on the turn to charge all the draws right now and leave yourself a smaller SPR on the river. All right, now I think Chris was asking when deeper stacks, with deeper stacks, how we should approach. So in general, and I say in general, I mean, there are like, I saw sometimes like on very, very good boards that villain can never have like the nuts when deep, like, I don't know, like ace, king, deuce, something like that, that it actually using a mix of small bets and big bets. But again, like in 99% cases, I mean, the flop sizing doesn't really change, or 95% cases. So basically I wouldn't even bother about it. But the turn sizing will increase. So basically what I would do is that I would try to bet a size that we can jab rivers and threaten villain's entire stack on the turn. That's basically when we are about like 120 to 140, 150 big blinds. Of course, if we are 300 deep, we're just not going to 2x turn to be able to jam the river. So like if we are super deep, like 300 big blinds, then we go big, but not crazy big. Overbet is not really a thing in 3-bet pot. So basically what I would do is that I would stick with something like 80 to 90, 95% pot. I think that's totally fine with a polarized range. Again, if the board is super dry, like there's no need to be betting like 90%. Like if the board again is like ace, 8, deuce, rainbow, turn deuce, I mean, I would bet something like, I wouldn't go 50%. I would probably go with something like 70, 75%. I wouldn't go crazy big and bet pot just because we give villain an easy way out by betting this big. I think that covers it. Do you guys have any questions about these turn sizings? Should be pretty simple. All right, so I don't see any questions. Let's continue. All right, so Jimmy's advice, choose the turn sizing depending on the board texture. On draw heavy texture, don't be scared to size up, even if that means SPR will be on the smaller side on the river. Make sure you do have a solid checking range after c-betting range. And most villains overfold massively on certain textures. We're going to be taking a look into that, which is like something that if you're not aware, I mean, it's quite ridiculous how wide we should be defending in some situations. Yeah, so that means that once they overfold the flop, they get to the turn with a tighter range than they should, then we get to the turn with our entire 3-betting range. So we have to be careful about betting the turn too often. Nick is asking, can we overbet river is super deep? Yes. So on the turn where we don't really do much overbetting, but on the river we can use more than, so I always advocate using one sizing on the flop, one sizing on the turn, and then we can start splitting our range on the river. So like you could have a regular sizing and also an overbet if super deep. Also, it really depends on the board run out and all that type of stuff. This is 3-bet pot. This is out of position. We're going to be focusing mainly out of position. We can talk about a bit about in position, but I think out of position is a bit. It's not an easy situation being in a big pot out of position. So I focused on being out of position. A lot of the concepts still applies for in position and all that, and also maybe we can potentially cover some in position stuff in the next month webinar as well. All right. So in order to cover all the different concepts and theory behind it, we will be covering a few different textures. This situation will always be button opens with 3-bet from the small blind and button calls. So let's take a look into it. So the first situation, the board is ace, 8, deuce, rainbow. My first question is off the top of your head, all right, on a blank 5 of whatever, right, doesn't bring backdoor flush draw, how much in terms of frequency should we be betting turn? I like that honesty, Maldwin. Okay. $55. I see some big numbers here, guys. 60, 55. Between that, that's a good answer, Karsten. All right. So I mean, the answer is around 30%. That's again also that's the betting frequency, the 30%. We're gonna take a look into it afterwards, but that's also against Pio, right? So like once we see bet range, Pio calls on the button. Pio is not going to be overfolding, right? So like it's still going to have a pretty wide range and it's betting around 30%. So if you would be, let's say, node locking villain's continuing range on the flop, I can button choose to overfold because we're going to see that like it's pretty hot, like it's not that easy to be continuing on a board like this. We're going to have to be checking more or less, guys. If villain overfolds, do you think we're going to be checking more or? Yeah, we're going to be checking more, of course. Because villain's range will be stronger and our range will still be pretty wide. Exactly. Now, if on a board like ace, 8, deuce, rainbow, we use a quarter pot full range strategy, how much do you think villain on the button should be folding the flop in terms of percentages? I'll grab a drink of water. I'm waiting. All right, so let's take a look into it. So here's the screenshot. Can you guys see pretty well? Can you guys see the picture well? Okay, great. So as you can see, like it needs to fold 15% of the time against a quarter pot full range bet. Now, the thing is that if you take a look at the continuing range, like, do you really think that people are calling like 6-5 suited, 7-6 suited? Like, this is like, there's no way people are doing that at lower stakes. Like even hands like 10-7 suited gets called once. Of course, not everybody calls that pre-flop, but like hands like 10-9, Jack-9, Queen-9, all like Jack-10, even Jack-10 suited, I think at lower stakes gets overfolded. It also needs to raise some like pocket 4s, pocket 3s. 5-4 has a gut shot, but again, like on these super dry boards, like where you see that, okay, it only raises 7%. What was I gonna say? I just lost. I was reading the question about Lurie, who was asking at lower stakes, the calling range pre is probably not as wide right now. It's probably like those hands, like 10-7 suited. I mean, it's really low frequency. And I think like people call all pocket pairs in this situation the suited connectors. And then I didn't put all as well of the ace-x suited. So I think it's pretty close, to be honest. Maybe like you can take out like king 7 suited and king 8 suited, but I only put, and jack 8 suited, but I only put like half of those combos. No, it's not a fold, Carlos. It should be like, okay, yes, it's a fold on the flop. Yes, of course. It's going to prefer hands that has like backdoor flush draws and like better backdoors in general. All right. Yeah, so like when the board is like so that's what I wanted to say is that like when the there's only like a 7% raising range here, which is basically like 11 or 12 combos here. The board is super dry. I would not like, I mean, when you take a look here and you say, oh my God, like this is pretty tough. You know, like I have to raise sometimes a hand like 7-6, pocket fours, pocket threes, like jack 9 suited, like sometimes 10s. Like, I mean, it's just like really low frequency everywhere. Just put it like in the trash and just say, I'm going to be calling my entire range here. It's going to be like a way more efficient strategy in the sense that like you're not going to overcomplicate things. You're going to be calling your entire range. And then you're going to have a better idea of how to approach the turn because, I mean, you won't be like raising some stuff. Like, I mean, it's pretty hard to construct that. So when you see that like the raising range here is pretty like complicated to do and it's not significant, just disregard it and just stick with a only call strategy on the flop. And I mean, again, like you see that like it needs to like call hand like 7-6, all, I mean, 5-4 as a gut shot, but hands like 10-9, jack 9, queen 9, mostly always call. The offsuit ones, I mean, it's pretty obvious that like the offsuit combos actually get folded. But again, we can see that like people will not be playing that type of strategy, that they will be overfolding quite a bit versus that bet. So once we get to the turn, we have to be a bit more careful. Now, the thing is that like on a board like this where it's super dry and the continuum range is, I would say, unnatural, we have to be a bit more careful on the turn. But there are some boards where, I don't know, like a board like 10-7-5, for example, where the continuing range will be much, much easier, right? It's going to be pairs like straight draws, flush draws, overcards with backdoor flush draw type of stuff. So it's going to be much more natural and people will not be overfolding as much as on a really dry board like this. This is why like a small bet high frequency is really powerful in our shoes. All right, so let's move on. Now, what I want to do is we can start talking about the turn strategy. So what I decided to do is instead of just using some screenshots, I actually pulled up the sim so it's easier to take a look at and also take a look at many different combos that we can barrel on the turn here. So e-calls. We already talked about, let's say, the 5 of spade. It bets around 25%. So like in general, it bets between, I would say, 25 to 30%. On this particular sim, I used only one sizing on the turn. Also, like I used the shoving size, but I didn't use a block because on this specific board, there's no turns that it's actually blocking. So it's basically just using like a medium size here. So that's the reason why but I usually do my sims with 2 sizing or 3 in the sense that like I use a block and I use a small, a medium, and then a big one as well. All right. Zanku is asking, when in position is folding 15%, does that mean 25 percent range bet from out of position is kind of bad or not the optimal strategy. Like on a board like this, it's actually betting like at a really, really high frequency for a small size. So, I mean, so the correct strategy, the thing is that like if villain is overfolding, so like if villain is folding too much versus c-bet, that means that on the flop, let's say your c-betting frequency is 60% or 70% and villain is overfolding versus the c-bet, that means that the actual frequency on the flop will actually go from, I don't know, 70 to 80 or 70 to 90 or 70 to 100. Nick is asking, if we assume in position is playing a pure call, then the turn strategy should be, yeah, it won't change all that much because the raising range is really polarized and it's not like the really, really strong hand always get called. Like pocket eights, like those type of hand, like, I mean, like it doesn't raise all that much. It's mostly deuces and then a bit of top pair. And then like, it's like, again, like the raising range is super tiny. Like if it was significant, the raising range, then I would agree. But like the raising range is quite small. So yeah. Eric, I'm going to be answering that later. Maria, can you repeat about the size, please? Which size you're talking about, the turn size? Amar, you're totally right. I agree with you. We're going to be taking a look into the turn barreling in just a few minutes. Yes, basically, like just to quickly summarize it, if we go a quarter pot, we can bet anywhere from 50 to 75% on the turn at 100 big blinds. Just keep in mind that when the turn is super dry like this, we just use a slightly smaller size and we leave ourselves a bigger SPR on the river. So let's say on a deuce of spade, for example, I would go something like between 50 to 60% turn. But if there are two flush draws present, then I would not bet on the smaller side. And then I would bet something like 70 to 85% to charge all the draws on the turn, even if we leave ourselves a smaller SPR on the river. All right, so now let's take a look into turn barreling, which is, I mean, kind of like the meat of the topic today. Just 1 second. So yeah, so basically once it's betting, we see that like it's betting about 26%. So it's basically saying, okay, I have a strong top pair or better. So it's checking all the weaker ones, right? It's checking like ace, like it's not even betting like ace king, ace queen, and ace jack all the time, but it's mostly saying, okay, I have a strong ace or better. And then what you have to keep in mind, okay, is that it's always going to be betting the natural bluffs first. So on this specific turn, I mean, do we have a lot of natural bluffs? No. I mean, the only natural bluffs we have is 7-6. And another cool thing that it actually does is that on those type of board where it's, again, like a bit on the drier side, it's starting to use like those turned pair into a bluff as well. So as you can see that like hands like 6-5 suited gets bet pretty much always when we have it. So a hand like 6-5, not only we block pocket fives, not only we block ace-5 suited, but we also have some added equity. We also have some added equity that when he has a hand like top pair, then at least we have 5 outs against that. I'm surprised that 5-4 is not betting. I would personally bet 5-4 as well. So I would probably start betting 5-4 more than 6-5 just because we have a bit more equity. And also, like, I don't expect a lot of shoving on this specific board. Yeah, maybe it's just a bit too much equity to be bet folding, but yeah. So yeah, so I mean, think about it. It always comes from the natural bluffs first. So on this board, the problem is that we don't have many natural bluffs. So basically, it's going to use all this 7-6. It's going to turn some turn pair into a bluff. And then it's going to be using some blocker type of hand into a bluff. So, I mean, it's going to be using hands like Queen Jack, Queen 10, queen nine. So hands that blocks is really strong hands like ace king, not ace king because he doesn't have ace king or should not have ace king. So he's gonna have ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9 type of stuff. What combo of king queen suited it's actually betting on the turn here, guys? Okay, spades. Yeah. So on the flop, okay, guys, I'm gonna ask you this. Would you say that king queen of spade or king queen of diamonds is a better bluff on the flop? I'm talking about the flop. I mean, we're betting range, but which one is better? Of course, right? Like having backdoor nut flush draw, I mean, is super important, right? When you're talking about like the quality of a bluff. Now, once the turn is a 5 of diamond, even though like king queen of spade was a really bad bluff on the flop, now it's actually becoming a really good bluff on the turn because we block all of his backdoor floats that he called the flop. For example, like king queen of heart, king queen of diamonds, king queen of club, all that stuff that he called the flop that now he's now going to be folding everything to a bet. So like this saying like is super important. Like a lot of the times a good bluffing hand on the flop on the turn becomes a bad bluffing hand on later streets, and a bad bluffing hand on the flop on the turn can become great bluffing hands on the river. Do you guys ever heard this type of saying? Yes, this is really important. Let me just look at the questions. How do you deviate with non-natural bluffs versus fish? I mean, yeah, I would tend to not bluff fish way too much. And also they're going to have way more ace-x here. Like they're going to be calling hands like ace-6 off, ace-9 off type of stuff. So it's not a spot where I'm just trying to like barrel queen-jack suited because I have good blockers. I mean, I'm probably going to be using a mixed strategy on the flop versus a fish. I'm not going to be betting my entire range. I'm going to be playing more mixed strategy. All right, so now let's continue. So again, like if you take a look also into, again, it's king, queen of spade that it's mostly betting. The other ones are mostly checking. If we take a look, let's say at the 5 of diamonds, now king, queen of diamond would be bet at a pretty high frequency. And then king, queen of heart would be bet at a pretty much never. King, queen of clubs, same thing. And then we can also bet spades because we still unblock some float. So let's take a look. The 5 of diamond. Yeah, so as you can see now, king, queen of diamond is a great bluff, right? Again, like we have the nut flush draw, but we're still betting hands like king, queen of spade, king, queen of diamond, and then the other ones where we block some of his fold, we just start checking. Yes. So now basically what I wanted to do is take a look at another turn. So for example, let's just take a really drawy turn like a 7. So again, now we saw that in the previous example on the 5, let's say the 5 of spade, like it was betting queen jack suited, right? Pretty much always. Now on a 7 of diamonds, where we have plenty of natural bluffs, right? I mean, we have like some 6-5, we have 9-10, jack 9, jack 10, we have all the diamonds, right? That we can bet. Now, betting the blocker type of hand is not that important and is not really a thing anymore because we have plenty of natural bluffs. So if we start bluffing like those like queen jack, queen 10 of spade type of hand, right, that we were betting previously, I mean, we're just going to be way overdoing it. So when you approach a turn, think about like of how much natural bluffs you actually have. I mean, we're not betting wider, right? It's not like we're betting hands like ace 10, ace 9, ace 6. Like we're still checking quite a strong range, but we have more natural bluffs. So that means, the only thing that means is that we're going to have less blocker type of like pure blocker type of bluffs in our betting range, basically. So if we take an extreme example, right? What do you guys think happened when it's the deuce of spade? Like, what do we start bluffing quite a lot then? Like on a deuce of spade, like what type of hand do you guys think that we're just going to be bluffing a whole lot? Yeah, exactly. So let's take a look into, let's say, the deuce of spade, for example, where like it's the ultra dryness board. I mean, now like all those hands becomes a lot more like queen jack always, king jack, queen 10, like all those hands gets bet at much higher frequency. And also like it's quite like it's quite uncomfortable betting it like in you guys' shoes, in the sense that like, I mean, you're betting like a hand with basically no equity on the turn. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just something that like, again, this is like the Pio solution. Do we have to play exactly like this? No, we don't, because people will be overfolding the flop. So they're going to be having a much stronger range. This is just to show you that how we should be approaching turn barreling. So I think that like we should be betting way less than this in terms of the blockers, because villain's range will be much stronger. But again, like we need some bluffs. We don't have any, so the only bluff that we can have is 5-4 suited, and we don't have that. We don't have that all the time. So basically, like we're gonna have to be betting like hands like Jack 10, Queen 10, Queen Jack type of hand on the turn as well, because other than that, we just don't have any bluffs. Okay, just 1 second. Amar, what is your approach on the river when betting those blocker ends on the turn? I mean, my approach would be to be giving up quite a bit, especially when the board is super dry and they call you on the flop and then call you on the turn as well. I mean, the thing is that like they probably have like ace-x 90% of the time. Now the question is, do I want to be trying to get him off ace-x? The answer is no. So yeah. So I mean, you're gonna be printing a lot of EV on the flop by him overfolding, and on the turn as well. But like on the turn, I don't think he's gonna be massively overfolding, because he's like once we bet the turn, for example, right? Let's say we bet here. I mean, he has to fold hands like 7-6, 6-5, 10-9, Jack-9, all that stuff, right? But in reality, they have way less of that stuff. So basically, they end up having too much ace-x and too much pairs compared. But I still think that like versus the other barrel, like hands like 6s, 7s, like will get folded at pretty high frequency at lower stakes. That's my opinion. Yeah, against better players, I mean, of course they might call, but even then, like I can see definitely like those calling on the flop for sure. But like once we bet like on such a dry board here, I think hands like 7s and 6s, we can get rid of those. So basically, when we get to the river, I mean, he's just gonna have ace-x, and it's like it's not a great proposition to try to take him off ace-x, basically. We're going to be talking about hands that we're going to be barreling or checking. We're not really going to be talking about this gecko. We're going to be talking about that next month. So let's focus on this. Now let's take a look into the flush draws, how we should be approaching it. In general, if we take a look at the flush draws, the ones that has some showdown value are usually the ones that are getting checked. So basically a hand like 9-8, 10-8, King-8 with a pair, basically, those usually get checked. A hand like an open-ended usually gets mixed between check and bet, but a hand like 6-5, what do you think happens once we see a bet here? Like, let's say we check 6-5. Yeah, I mean, it's just check raising. Yeah, I mean, it has a lot of equity. It has 6 high. A hand like 10-9, I think it can still call because it has so much equity. So if we take a look into like a check, and then villain should be betting. Yeah, so it's jamming like 5-4 of diamonds always, and 6-5. but like a hand like 10-9, it's also, oh no, sorry, just checking, bet. I mean, it's never raising. I mean, the only hand, yeah. So basically the only hand that's raising is the 6-5 of diamond. Like even the 10-9 of diamonds is just calling like always. Like, I mean, because it has 2 overs to the 8, like 10 high. I mean, 6 high is just way too bad. So yeah. Okay. Do we triple barrel bluff flush draws on the turn that breaks river? I mean, like in general, like the flush draws are pretty bad when you're actually jamming river. But I mean, if you bet, let's say a hand like 5-4, I mean, 5-4 of diamonds, you unblock all of his overcards like 9-10 or bigger diamonds also. So hands like king, queen of diamonds, queen, jack of diamonds, like all that stuff, I would probably give up. And then we're gonna have hands like 6-5, 9-10 without diamond that we can just triple, blocking some good ace-x, unblocking some of his fold as well. Yeah, so in terms of flush draws, again, like the ones that has some showdown value, with a pair, usually it's usually checking in order to check call, not really check jam. And then the other ones are mostly getting bet. So as you can see, I don't know why king jack gets checked a bit more than all the other ones. But again, like it's mostly going to be betting. I mean, you have like queen high. When you're in position, I mean, we get to be checking a bit more because just checking, we can just realize our equity and get to the river. But on here, I mean, if we have like queen high, it's not that great to just check call because we're out of position. We don't have the luxury to actually be checking back the river and get to showdown. So again, like this is about this situation. I mean, we covered not too much. Do you guys feel that it's a really complicated strategy here that like after talking about it, taking a look into it, do you feel that it's a strategy that it will be pretty hard to implement in game, for example? No, exactly. I mean, of course, like, I mean, of course, like if you just take 10 minutes like here from this webinar and you tell yourself, oh my God, like, can I play this good or no? I mean, of course, it might be a bit complicated at first, but I mean, if you put in a bit of study, you don't need a lot of time to actually understand how to approach turns and how the turn barreling actually works. Yeah, Roy, basically like what we try to do here is not try to copy paste stuff, is we try to understand the reasoning behind it, how it approaches certain situations, try to understand concepts. Yeah. So now let's take a look into a higher turn. So like I would say like a queen of diamond. So yeah, now the turn, like we can be betting at a higher frequency. We can be betting a bit more. But again, we have plenty of natural bluffs. So again, like if we take a look at a king, it's still betting around like 40%, a jack, same thing. It's really like on blanks that we get to be checking quite a lot. So anything from there, if we take a look here, we can see that like on the bigger cards here, like it's betting around 40% of the time. On the smaller card, it's betting around like 30% of the time. So we still have to be checking quite a bit on like all the medium stuff, but like we also have really like strong hands once we get to the turn here. But again, like on a queen, for example, queen of diamond, again, it's really polarized. Like it's betting king, queen. Like I would not personally bet king, queen. I would put that in my checking range. I would probably bet a bit less ace-x as well, be bluffing just a tad less as well. I mean, we have plenty of natural bluffs, so we have to be quite careful here. quite careful in the sense that, like, I mean, we have like king jack off, king jack suited, king 10 suited, jack 10, jack 9, 10 9, all the flush draws. Just 1 second. Amar is asking how to find these low pocket pair as a bluff, like sixes. Yeah, it's actually using like some of the like lowest pocket pair into bluff sometimes. But again, like it's hard to construct. I would stick, like, even if you don't bluff like those two combos, I think that's fine. Like, but you have plenty of natural bluffs, right? So I mean, just sticking with those, I think, is totally fine. Ali's is asking, do we use this strategy against every opponent, or do we have to adjust with turn barreling? I mean, the thing is that, like, this is like just a overall approach that I want you guys to learn and be aware about, in the sense of like how we should be approaching turn barreling on different type of turns. How should we be approaching on different textures and all that type of stuff? We understand that, then we take a look into how villain is playing, and then we try to adjust. Again, like, if I'm playing against a recreational, there's no way I'm going to be tripling like jack 10 suited on an ace high board just because I have good blockers. He's just gonna call me with ace 5 off, and he doesn't care. I float is asking, why not block with queen X? I remember solver does that given the option. So many ups in villain's range. Yes, if you give the option to actually block bet, it would actually block bet hands like queen jack, king queen, those type of stuff. But I personally do not use two sizings on the turn. I would also advocate to be using only one sizing on the turn. I think you're going to be playing a better strategy than of mixing on the turn by using like a check, a block bet, and also a big bet. I mean, if you put in the time to understand that approach and know like what bluffs to put in both sizings and how to balance all of that, I think it can potentially be fine. But I don't think the EV gain will be drastic. So I would personally tend to stick with only one sizing on the turn. But yes, you are totally right. It would actually block bet given the option. Let me just do something. All right, just 1 second, guys. I'm going through. Sorry if I missed some questions. Yes, this is for a 60%, right? Against a small stakes opponent that overfolds flop, do you just bluff all hands less, or do you choose specific hands and not bluff others that Payo would? Basically, like, if he overfolds quite a lot on the flop, I'm going to try to tone down my bluffing frequency on the turn. So I'm going to try to pick my really good bluffing hands. So like hands that, you know, like spade combos on like rainbow turns type of stuff like we saw. You know, I'm going to try to pick the really best bluffing hands, and I'm going to be much more careful. Mukesh is asking, should we use one sizing on turn? On turn, something like 60 to 70 for all board textures. Yes, I would. That's how I personally approach it. I tend to just use one sizing on the turn, and then if I want to use more than one sizing, I go on the river. So Anders is asking a good question here. How do you know which size to put into solver for flop if we are not sure about it, if it's 33% or 75%, and we want to find one sizing? This is why you need to do multiple runs. So the first run of the simulation that you're going to do, you're going to have multiple sizings on the flop. So let's say you have like 25, 50, 75. And then you run the simulation, you see that it prefers the 25%, that it basically c-bet its entire range. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do another sim where you remove the other sizing, and then you put in the 25%, for example, with the entire range c-bet. All right. So now let's just take a look with the block on the turn, let's say on a queen. So yeah, I mean, it's using quite a lot of block. I'm quite surprised here. Also, the thing is that, like, if we bet really small, like this is also something like that's a bit surprising to me, that it's betting that much with the small size. And one of the reasons is that also lately, like if you look at the pre-flop Bible, it's really like some solver-oriented ranges. Everybody was using different ranges before, and there are many different things that happens with those type of ranges where they're a bit tighter, less suited connectors heavy and all that. Yeah, I think it's also like iFloat mentioned, it's like there's many under pairs also that we get to put into a tough spot. But the problem with this is that like it will be also overfolding quite a bit versus the flop bet. So I mean, we don't put as many hands into a tough spot. But I would personally stick with just a regular, like I would say here I put a block. But again, like it's a pretty interesting situation where let's just go back to the first one where yeah, so where like I would just use a like a one sizing personally, but again, like we could potentially use two. I would just say that again, like I would take a look into the strategy, study it, see what I need to be bluffing and all that type of stuff in order for us to be using that. But yeah. So again, like the Queen of Hearts, does anybody have questions about this? We're going to be moving on to another another board here. What are our give ups? Our give ups will basically be like the really bad bluffing hands. You know, like the hands that like has some showdown value, like hands like nines, 10, jacks. Those has a bit too much showdown value to actually be betting. And then we're also going to be checking like really bad hands like 7-6 of heart that we didn't pick up any backdoors type of stuff. Like the really bad hands goes into the checking range. The hands that has some showdown value that are medium strength goes into the checking range. And yeah. All right. I mean, we're not going to be taking a look into river play here, but yeah, I mean, also like you could see that like it's checking quite a bit of like stronger pair, like even with the with the ranges we like most people were using before, it was actually checking a lot more on the turn, but it's still doing quite a bit of like slow playing, just because like once you check, villain will be bluffing quite a lot. So like once you check here, like he's gonna start bluffing like hands like 3s, 4s, 5s, hands like 8, 7, 7, 6. I mean, those are flush draws, but like some gut shot as well. So like he's gonna be bluffing quite a bit. So I mean, just checking here with some strong hand makes sense against a really aggressive player, which can be bluffing. But again, like I would tend to slow play a bit less than solver would, just because we're out of position. And like here checking eights, like I would probably just bet all the time, because I think the players we are facing are not bluffing enough. So basically like unblocking is ace X and we have a set here. I would just be betting this and then potentially just be betting a bit less ace X, ace 8, for example. All right. So the second situation I want to be taking a look into is Queen 8 deuce flush draw. So we're still c-betting range here for a smaller size. Again, like villain should be folding around 13% of the time. His calling range includes all pocket pair, and then those hands are a bit more, I would say, obvious, in the sense that like on the ace 8 deuce rainbow, he was floating more of those. Now he only needs to fold like the flush draw or just the backdoor flush draw one. So it's a bit more natural here. Again, like he can start folding hands like ace 6, even hands like ace 5, and then with 2 overs, ace 10 plus. I mean, ace 9, it's only the backdoor flush draw. So again, the defending range is a bit more natural here. It's going to be including like all pairs, gut shots, and then flush draws, and then overcards. And then the other ones, I mean, he might be overfolding in the part of maybe like the pocket threes without a diamond type of hand. But with a diamond, I do expect them to call on the flop. Maybe like at lower stakes, people fold those. But yeah, so it's not like it's going to be way overfolding. But now, if we take a look into, again, like the strategy here about like on a blank, it's going to be mostly using the medium size, and it's going to be having the same approach as the other situation. So it's mostly going to be betting king, queen plus. The other ones like queen, jack, queen 10, queen 9 gets checked. Mostly the medium pairs gets checked as well. And we're going to be really polarized. So again, we're going to be using the natural bluffs first. So now, how would you guys split your nut flush draws in this case? Let's say now we have the possibility to have an ace-high flush draw. Which one do you think we're going to be betting more? Which one do you think we're going to be checking more? How would you guys approach this? Yeah, let's take a look. So now, yeah, I mean, you could see it like ace king, ace jack. The ones that has more showdown value that we can easily check call here are the ones that are mostly getting check called. Again, ace 3, ace deuce has some showdown value as well. And then it's betting like all the middling ones. So the ones that doesn't have showdown value are getting checked. If the 8 was like a heart and the deuce of diamond, it would check some 8x of diamond because it has some showdown value. No, ace deuce, ace 3 mostly goes check call, I would assume. So wanted check, villain, let's say he bets. I mean, yeah, it's just calling those against the bigger size, potentially. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not like it's raising a hand like ace 3 or hard, but not the ones with the diamond. So it's mostly like it has some showdown value, so we don't need to be check raising here. And then hands like ace king of diamond makes great check call hand on the turn to still have some flush. We still have some showdown value against any unpaired type of hand that he might have, which is great. And then again, it's going to be using like the natural bluffs first. So like hands like jack 10, jack 9, 10, 9, some flush draws that we just took a look into. And again, we're not betting hands like jacks, 10s, like all the middling stuff. We're going to be really polarized to something like queen X or better. Do you guys have any questions about a blank turn? We're going to take a look at other turns as well. All right. So now let's take a look. What would you guys do on a king of club turn? Like what sizing would you use? Like a big or small size? And like what type of frequency would you guys use? Bet often, okay. Big sizing, 50% frequency, high frequency, and bet queen X as well. Okay, high flow, that's a strong card, could bet range. Big, it improves your range, often, and big size. All right, let's take a look. King of club. As you can see, I mean, it's checking around 26% of the time. And it's mostly betting big. Again, like if you put in those two, like the block and the medium size, it's always going to be blocking some hands like 10s, jacks, some stuff like that as well. Now, the thing is that like I personally don't do that. So I would just recommend using like a one sizing turn strategy. So using like a medium size and then just play that strategy really well. And then as you can see, of course, if we only use like the medium one, it would probably bet something like instead of checking 26, it would probably be checking, I don't know, like 35 to 40% and then be betting like 60% or 55 to 60% overall. But again, like here, we can say that we are really aggressive. Like, I mean, we're betting all the king nine. We're betting even some like ace queen to the big size, hands like queen jack to the big size as well. So we can be really aggressive because the king is a really good turn card for us, and we can be putting in a lot of money. And that's true pretty much every time with the king turn. I don't randomize my nines through jacks because I don't bet them, because I don't use the block on this specific turn card. I would just use a medium size and bet because like tens is betting, but it's only betting small. Jacks, same thing. So I don't want to create another range where I'm just betting small. I'm just going to be using a medium sizing. Medium sizing, yeah. So now also something I want to take a look at is the three. So, okay, this is also a really important topic. So in this situation, right, on a three of spade, right, we're doing quite a lot of checks, right? So on a blank, we saw that earlier on the ace eight deuce. On a blank, we do quite a lot of checks. Now, I want to be taking a look, let's say, let's put the six. Okay, so let's put the six here. So what I want us to show here, right, is that I want to take a look at the really, really strong hands in our range. So if you take a look at pocket eights, right, it's checking 100% of the time, right? If you take a look at pocket sixes, it's checking like 60% of the time. Hands like ace queen, it's still checking quite a bit. I mean, quite a bit, about around 30%. So that's because our checking range needs to be stronger in the sense that we are checking a lot. So we're going to be checking stronger hand as well. Now, do I advocate doing that? No. I mean, if you have pocket sixes here in your games, I would definitely bet pretty much always pocket sixes. Like I would not try to do some checking unless I have a specific read, just because against the check, villain needs to be quite aggressive. And a lot of the times people will be aggressive on the turn, right? They're going to be betting a bluff on the turn, but they're just going to give up the river. So you check call the turn and then he just gives up. Or yes, we can check raise as well. But again, I would rather take the matters into my own hands and just bet myself. Now, what I wanted to show is that if the turn is, let's say, a king of club, right? Now, like in general, like this is, now it's still checking quite a lot, but it's fast playing also, like those over pairs, even hands like kings are getting bet. This, like in previous sims, to be honest, it's probably because the ranges are a bit tighter and also like it's switched up, but those hands would go really high in value, like in terms of frequency, in the sense that it would start betting a lot more often. It's kind of the same situation where, let's say you guys are in the big blind, right? It's a situation like, let's say the button opens, and we are in the big blind and we call. So it's a single raise pot and the board is ace 10-9 flush draw. We check, button checks back. The turn is a deuce. What would be your sizing when betting there on the turn? On ace 10-9 turn deuce, when probing, what type of sizing would you guys use? Yeah, so we would use the big size. We would use a big size. We would not bet that often. We would bet, I don't know, like 20 or 15% of the time, 15, 20% of the time, we would use a big overbet. And also, that means that we don't get to be betting a lot. So that means that also we're going to have to do a lot of checking really strong hands to be able to delay check raise as well. So in situations where we do a lot of checking, we tend to be checking more strong hands as well. In situations where we do a lot of betting, our strong hands also fast plays. So there's gonna, in situations where we bet like a certain spot at a high frequency, don't think about balancing your range and just having like quite a lot of like checking some strong hand as well. Just mostly bet your strong hand as well. In spots where we check, I don't know, like 70% of the time or 80% of the time, that means that we're going to be doing quite a bit more checking with our really strong hand as well. But again, like it's a spot here where it kind of like, I mean, this is a super strong hand with pocket eights, but it kind of like shows what I wanted to say here. Because if we take a look, let's say on, I don't know, like the 4 clubs, like it's not even betting all the top pair type of hand. Like it's betting like half of queen jack, not even half, like betting 30%, 30% is betting half the time ace queen. And now if you put in the king of club, now top pair is basically never getting checked. Like it's betting all the top pairs. And that's the only reason is that it's betting this turn at a really high frequency. That means that we have a lot of top pair right into our betting range. That means we can bluff also more. Okay, so now we covered this. What about now the ace of club turn? Like what frequency would you guys use? What type of sizing would you guys use? Same as king. Check more. Okay, big size, medium frequency. Anybody else has some inputs? Block bet, similar to king, high frequency, smaller sizing. Yeah, we're gonna put a stop to that, Johnny. Yeah, so basically, like on an ace turn, a few of you had the correct answer, but it's a high frequency small bet strategy that we use. So, like on these turns, right? Like if we just take a look into like the range, right? Let's just take a look. Select none. For out of position, we have 44 combos of top pair, right? And for in position, we have 22 combos of top pair. And even when I was running my sims like a year ago, where my ranges were much wider because I had every ace-x suited in it in the range, and then let's say in position, I put every ace-x suited also in the range, for example. But now with the solvers and stuff, we see that like it's not always calling it and 3-betting them. Just 1 second. So yeah, it was still doing that. But now, like on an ace turn, because if you take a look here, like he folds some hands, like he folds ace-3 of spade and club, ace-4, same thing, ace-5, ace-6, ace-7. So he folds some ace-x on the flop, but we actually see bet range here. So we bet all of our ace-x. So when the turn ace gets there, it's actually a really good turn card because as we saw, we have double the amount of top pair that villain has. Let's see the ace of heart. It's still doing the same thing. It's still doing the same thing. And yeah. So again, like it's betting some hands with the bigger size, but again, I would just stick with a only block strategy here, where I only block and then we're going to be talking about river for this exact situation as well. But I would only block my entire range. And again, like it's pretty easy to actually only be blocking because I mean we just get to bet like pretty wide. We can still value bet hands like kings, like pretty much all of our ace-x, and then the hands that actually goes in the checking range will be like the pure hands that gave up, like 7-6 a heart, like 6-5 a heart, like some hands like 8-9, and then like the middling pocket pairs like the 9s, 7s type of stuff. Like I'm pretty surprised that 6s gets bet all the time. Because I mean we still have quite a bit of natural bluffs here as well. I would not bet range here, Carson, just for the reason I mentioned, because the checking range is pretty easy to play, whereas it's going to be some middling pocket pairs, that, like you mostly bet with a diamond. That's pretty much how it happens. But again, like those middling pocket pairs, they just get to check, and then you get to check the pure give ups, and then you kind of bet like pretty much all the rest. So we can be pretty aggressive here, to be honest. I would not be using two sizings on the turn. That's what I mentioned. I put in two sizings because on this board, there's going to be some runouts where it's actually going to be doing some blocks. So I keep the block in. This is why I took out the block on the first, because I'm just using like a one sizing turn strategy. So just blocking on some turns, it might make some sense. Like I think iFloat mentioned, but for me personally, I'm just sticking to one sizing. Eric is saying, earlier you mentioned some general concepts about when the king comes up on turns. Can you repeat? Yeah, I mean, when the king gets there in general, it's always going to be a really good card for you when you bet your entire range. So we're going to be betting like the king at a really high frequency, and it's using pretty much always a bigger size. Yeah, so we're blocking this turn because it's a really good turn card for us, and also like the equities are a bit more stable than on a king, so we get to be betting a bit on the smaller size. Against the block, I mean, he should not be fold. Like, yes, I mean, he should be folding hands like sixes, but again, like he should still be calling hands like eights. Like an eight is pretty standard, and then hands like tens, jacks, that's what he calls. I mean, he needs to be calling like, I mean, okay, that has a double gutter. Does he have to be calling hands like 9-10? No, not always. So he gets to fold hands like 9-10, but I mean, he also that's also like something like he needs to start raising like those low pocket pairs type of stuff, and it's like, I really like this strategy. I mean, we're going to be talking about the river. On the flush completing turn, again, like this is what happens where like I would have said like a year ago, I would have been blocking. But here, like once we start using more of these type of ranges, it's using less and less blocking. So you could see like on a 6, it's using like it's checking. Like, I mean, the main idea on the flush turn is that it's not a great turn card for you. So basically, you have to be checking quite a bit. I have been using the strategy where I'm actually blocking. And then we're going to be talking about the river as well, how to approach that in just a few minutes. But here, I mean, in this type of situation, I looked up a couple other situations with these type of ranges, and it's actually using always the medium size. I was quite surprised, but I wouldn't mind using a block on a flush turn as well, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, you could do both. It's just a matter of how you construct your betting range. You have to be checking quite a lot. I mean, again, like here, it's not betting ace queen. So like it's pretty polarized. So like once it's polarizing that much, right, where it's not betting ace queen, it's only betting kings plus, pretty much with a diamond in it, then I mean, it kind of makes sense to actually be betting on the bigger side, because I mean, it's betting bluffs, and then it's also going to be betting like hands like flushes. Yeah. If we were a bit thinner for value, then, but again, it's only betting kings plus for value. Then I mean, going on a more polarized side makes sense. Let me just go through. Stefan Grubrick is asking, how does ace change on the turn rather than on the river from both out of position and in position? On the turn, we get to do a lot of blocking. But if, let's say, the turn is like the 6 offsuit, we're going to be pretty polarized on the turn when betting. Of course, we're going to have some ace X, but what's going to happen is that on the river, we're mostly going to be jamming or checking. And then we're going to be repping like a strong ace, or better that we bet the flop, bet the turn with, and then on the river. But then if the ace gets there on the turn, then the approach on the river is a bit different. But again, I'm going to be talking about that in just a few seconds. I float. Yes, exactly. Basically, I float. He answered what I just said. What sizing is the block percentage size? Go anywhere from like 25 to 30%. I think that, I mean, 30% is fine. Which flush is slow play? Let's take a look. It's slow plays. Like, I'm quite surprised because like in my other sims as well, like it would be slow playing a hand like a bit more like ace king, with having the king is not great. I mean, of course it's great. We have the nut flush, right? But we block some of this like king 10, king 9, like king jack of diamond, jack 10, like, well, not jack 10, but like all those really strong flushes. And then a hand like ace 7 or ace 5, ace 4 that would potentially get bet pretty much always. But we see that it's actually slow playing some of our worst flushes here. Also, we 3-bet less suited connectors, so we're gonna have like those becomes our worst flush basically in a lot of situation. On a big diamond, no, I think like on a big diamond we do use the block again. So like on a king of diamond, like now the block becomes more appealing again, and also on the ace. Yeah. But again, like on the ace of club, we can be really aggressive, right? Because I mean, the turn, like it's pretty good for us. And also, I mean, nothing really completed here. But like on an ace of diamond, like the flush got there, which is not great. So just going with a smaller size, I think makes sense on both like the ace or king of diamond. And let's say jack, yeah, and then like on the lower turn, like being a bit more polarized, I think is fine as well. But again, like there's merits to both strategies. I've been using like a blocking on the turn on most flush runouts, and I've been liking this strategy. But we're going to be talking to it in just a few minutes after I get to answer some of the questions. Okay, just 1 second, guys. Okay, I answered that. I think checking range on the turn in 3-bet pot on a flush is just way overdoing it, because first of all, like we just have to agree that like on a flush turn, it's not a great turn card, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to check range. There's still a part of your range that really wants to bet, that we can still bet. So if you just go with a like just check range, I think we're going to cost ourselves a bit too much EV. Angel, do we check if we hit showdown value on turns? Yes, we do. Like if we, I mean, it depends on the showdown value. Like if we take a look here, right? Ace 8 deuce calls. If the turn is a 10, like, I mean, we're not going to be betting 10x, right? Like 10x here. Of course, if we use like couple sizings on the turn, maybe. But again, like I'm still quite surprised it's betting like king 10 here. But I mean, most 10x were getting checked. Now, if the turn is, let's say, like a 6, now it's turning some hands like 6x into a bluff. But now it's turning some hands like 6x into bluff, because a hand like 6x has less showdown value than a hand like 10x or jack x that turn, basically. All right, so let's go back to the other one. So here, yeah, so once we check, yeah, villain should be, again, like we're checking a really strong range, right? I mean, we're checking hands like ace queen, we're checking aces, like we're checking some really strong hands like queens, jacks. So villain cannot be stabbing all that wide here. So that's why versus a check here, he's gonna be stabbing on the wide, like on the bigger side, here. So once he bets, I mean, in terms of flushes, I mean, we never get to jam except like those ones, which makes sense. But again, like this is also to take with a grain of salt, because like once he bets, I mean, he needs to be turning all the threes basically into a bluff, all the fours, fives, like hands like 6-5 a heart. Like, come on, like not 6-5, but like hands like king 10 probably. Yeah, like king 10, ace 10, all the small pocket pairs, like 5-4 hearts, like are really people doing that. So again, like once we check and he bets and we call, and then the river is, I don't know, like a 3 of spade. Like he's jamming like those. I mean, 3 is fine, but like 4s, 5s, like 5-4 a heart, 6-5 a heart, like king 9. Oh, king 9 is diamond, but if we take out diamonds, jack 8, yeah, 2 pair. But it's turning all those hands into bluff. Like, guys, do you really expect people to be like jamming 4s, 5s, and oops, sorry. Like, do you really expect to be like turning those hands into bluff at like your stakes? Like, this is not happening, because they don't even like first of all start bluffing them on the turn. So the EV of slow playing here, right? Like of just calling a flush, for example, like versus the bet. I mean, it makes some sense versus a very aggressive villain, right? But like, since most people will never do that, I think that we, first of all, need to be betting a bit more flushes than we are in reality, and also just be fast playing a bit more than we would be. Do you guys have any questions about this? Is it check jamming a hand like ace queen of diamonds? But yeah, that would go in the shoving range here. Like hands that needs more protection, and like jacks. Like jacks is pretty cool, or 9-10, right? Just because I mean, we unblock his queen X, and also like, as you can see, like 10-9 of diamonds is never raising. It's only raising like the ones that needs a bit more protection. I mean, again, like we have basically the nuts here if he doesn't have a flush. So yeah. All right, let me just. Mar is saying, after a few beers, I do this. Now I know this is GTO. That's good. Make sure you drink the beers after, though, your session, not before. No, of course, that's a really good, Chris Bull. That's a really good question. Like ace king with the, like all the bluffs here. I mean, it's because villain will be betting here pretty wide, right? Like he's going to be betting hands like 3s, 4, like all those stuff, right? We can expect people to always bet, like not always, but like I want to know for in position how much flush. Like he should be checking back like 33% of his flushes. But I mean, it's not that many. But the thing is that, like, again, like people are under bluffing. So do we really want to start like check raising bluffing like optimally? No. So hands like ace king off with like the king of diamonds, that sometimes actually once he bets is actually jamming, like, or with the ace of diamond, like I wouldn't mind it, to be honest, like, but I wouldn't start doing it with the king of diamonds. We can just cut those out, and then with the few ace king of club, ace king with the diamond, with the ace of diamond that we actually check, we could start bluffing. If you think that villain is a bit more aggressive, yes, of course, do that. I mean, if the flush coming in on the river that much. First, like if the flush gets there on the river, like the thing is that we're gonna have bet the turn big, so we're gonna have be betting big, call, and then this is like 5 of heart. Now let's do the 5 of spade. Bet big, call. Then the river, I don't know, like the 3 of diamond. Now it's using like a block and a jam. Again, the thing, okay, so here basically what I would do again is that I would use only one sizing here. And one of the reason is that, I mean, the pot is already like 760, and then we're betting like 1/3 pot, leaving ourselves like 380, like 38 big blinds behind, which for me, like, is not, like, we could potentially use a strategy where we bet like 1/10 pot, right? And then use a jam. But what I would do on a flush run out basically is that I would still jam a hand like aces with a diamond. Like I would never jam a hand like aces without a diamond. That's way too thin versus our population. Maybe kings with a diamond as well. But like that would be pretty much player dependent. But I would just take out the blocking, and then I would just only jam, because we have like, I mean, if the stack to pot ratio is bigger, and on the river we still have, I don't know, like 100 big blinds right behind. So we have 100 big blinds. There's 76 big blinds in the middle, right? Then I would definitely use a blocking strategy and then a jamming strategy as well. But like when I have less than the stack to pot ratio, I don't really use, so I would just use like a pure jam or check strategy there. Andre is asking, so you are not afraid of getting run over once you check on the turn? I mean, you still have good hands to call, but less than solver. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if I'm playing against a strong player, right, that I think is able to bluff and all that, I'm going to be having a pretty solid checking range on the turn. You know, I'm going to try to play a pretty solid strategy. If I'm playing against like a weaker player, I'm going to be playing a bit more face up. Yes. Okay. If you are very deep, Chris, I actually made a video about a deep spot that I encountered at 500 Zoom. So if you have access to the Lab Plus, I would strongly suggest that you take a look into it. It covers basically like a situation where I think I was like 250 deep, threw a pot out of position, and then I bet the flop, bet the turn with a flush draw, and then I hit the river. As a flush, yes, the king jack of diamond hand, and then that we covered some really cool, interesting stuff there. I think it's this month. So yeah, pocket eights. Let's see. Once it checks, bet. I mean, it's just calling. That's the problem, right? Like it's just calling. Like here against the bigger size, it's going to be check raising just a bit higher, but not that much. It's mostly calling because villain on the button is bluffing enough. So like if you take a look, like it's calling here, but like on like I don't know, like a 4 of heart river, you check. I mean, it's going to be jamming hands like Jack 9, like King 9, like King 10, like Ace 9, 5s. Like it's going to be shoving all sorts of hand. Like Ace 3 is a straight, but like that's what I mean. Like, so like he's going to have like some bluffs there. But the thing is that like against the population, do we expect them to be bluffing on the river as much as like a solver would? No. So what we have to do is we have to fast play a bit more on the turn there. So I would personally just bet myself, because I think people will be making more mistake as a call than by bluffing in general. But is he bluffing more than we would get value from a queen with a barrel? Personally, like, I mean, I'm not like a hand like queen 10, queen 9, like I'm still checking like mostly on the turn. Like here, like queen jack, queen 10, queen 9, I'm just going to be checking. I'm talking about like the really strong hands from our range. Because again, like queen 9, do you really want to be like betting turn and then jamming river and be good? Basically, no, right? But a hand like 8s, you really want to be putting all the money in because, I mean, you beat basically everything in this range. But a hand like queen 9, even, I mean, if he checks and underbluffs the river, the turn, I mean, we just get to bet the river and then we get 2 streets, which is what this hand is basically worth. But a hand like 8s really wants to put in money, or a hand like 5s really wants to put all the money in. So if he underbluffs, then it's going to cost us quite a lot. Also, like he should be jamming, like once we check and he bets, let's say he bets like this, call, then the river is a 4, check. I mean, he needs to be jamming queen jack or like queen 10 when he has that. You know, people are not going, like, I can't even see people like check back king, queen, that type of stuff. Like I've seen that many, many times. Like people don't go enough for thin value. So if he bets actually small, we call, then the river's a 4, check. Yeah, I mean, he should be jamming hands like queen 10 a heart, right? Like queen 10 a heart, like queen jack. Like people are not doing that, to be honest. Like, and they're not like bluffing hands like 5. Like they're just not doing that. So like especially out of position, try to approach this situation where, like, if you have a hand that can only get 2 streets, like a hand like queen 9, queen 10, I would mostly try to check those. But if you have a hand like you unblock all of his queen X, like 8s and 5s, then I would really tend to be fast playing those hands. Like if you have a read, then yes, okay, maybe check. But okay, if we decide to check a hand like queens, we block all of his queen X. I mean, that's fine. But a hand like 8s at like 50 zoom, 100 zoom, I would pretty much always bet. Unless I have a read. Mm-hmm. All right, that's my default too. We're just wondering why Pio is always checking 8s. Yeah, just because it's bluffing enough and it's going for thin value enough and all that type of stuff, which is not the case for the people you're playing against. So just fast play a bit more. You guys have any other questions about this? Let's just move on. All right. All right. So let's take a look into another situation here. I mean, it really depends on the player, Nick. I mean, I cannot say like at 200, 500. I mean, even at 500 zoom or higher, like there are some people that are just not bluffing enough. Like it's not because people are playing higher that they're actually better. In a sense, yes, but most people like are still under bluffing. Like one thing, like if I were to give you one advice, right? For you to move up. You tell me you play 100, you try to move up at 200. If I could give you the best advice, that would be to stick with your original game plan. Don't change a thing. Don't tell yourself, oh my God, now I'm playing 200 zoom. People must be like really good, so they're going to have some bluffs everywhere. No, they don't. They don't. People like, if like all the natural bluffs gets there, just fold. Just fold, just fold, just fold. Yeah, I think that's the best. I think that's the best advice. By the way, iFloat, are you the iFloat on GG Poker? If I can, if I don't mind asking. Cool. I'm a French baller on GG, so that I'm not sure if you know. Yes. All right. So cool that you are in this webinar. Yeah, so basically, like, that's what I would say is that, like, just stick with your original game plan. If you beat the stake, right, that you were playing, basically just do exactly what you've been doing. Don't try to say that people are just are much better than they are, because it's not the case. All right, so let's keep moving on now. Let's take a look into the third and final situation that I want to take a look at. This time, it's a situation where we 3-bet the small blind against the button, and we actually c-bet half pot full range. So 10 high board are really good for us. They're bet at a really high frequency. So using something like a 50% range c-bet makes a lot of sense here. All right. Usually, like the 10 high boards, when you go down to like 8x, 8-7x, 9-7x, 7-5x, like those boards are pretty good for you. So I think those board, betting those at pretty high frequency, like a 10-9 deuce board, 10-7 deuce board, those 10 high boards are pretty, like, you can definitely be pretty aggressive there. Like those middling boards without suited connectors, where like it are like I don't know, like 8-7 deuce, 9-7-5, 7-5 deuce are much worse, and they get with a more mixed strategies, and less frequency. Why aren't we betting 1/3 but half pot? Just because the board, like on an ace high board, for example, that we want to be betting at a pretty high frequency, right? Just using a smaller size makes a lot of sense, just because when you have an ace on ace-8 deuce rainbow, you're pretty much having the nuts. So the equities are not as stable, right? Are very stable, on ace-8 deuce. So let's say your opponent has 9, as pocket nines, and the board is ace-8 deuce and you have ace-jack. Your opponent has pretty much no equity, right? I mean, he's drawing to 2 outs, and there's nothing really in between. So it's either you're way ahead or way behind. So using smaller bets in those type of situations makes a lot of sense. Now, on the board like this, where it's still very good for you, right? 10-7 deuce, super good for you. But now the equities are not as locked up anymore, just because of the fact that there's going to be some overcards. They're also a big part of your range. Like, let's say you talk about 10x, right? Like Jack 10, Queen 10, King 10, Ace 10, Jacks, Queens, Kings. They want to be putting in money into the flop right now, because on the turn they might not be able to, because again, the equities are not as locked up. So on the lower boards, the bigger sizing makes sense. There are also some situations where it's actually going like 3/4 spot on like those boards I mentioned, like 7-5, 9-7x type of board. But I'm sticking with like a 50% sizing, because just because of the fact that with the 50% size, we put in more money into the pot, and also we put more of villain's range into a tough spot. If the board is pretty dry and we just bet pot size bet, or like bet 3/4, we kind of give villain an easy way out on the flop. This is not what we want to do. All right. George is asking, you run sims on Pio with pre-flop, no luck, small blind? No, I don't run the node. I mean, node locking is quite dangerous because you're making assumptions. It's good to do that sometimes, to actually have an understanding of how you should be approaching certain situations. What I would suggest is that in some situations, try to take a look at a certain situation with different type of ranges, different type of stack size as well. So that way you kind of know how like stack size ranges differentiates on different type of boards. If you want to buy Pio, I mean, you have to be careful. You have to know how to approach solvers and all that type of stuff. Because like, don't try to just take a look at the sim and then just say, okay, I'm going to be playing like that, because I mean, you're just going to be it's just not going to work for you. So yeah, so again, like against the 50% size, he needs to fold about 15% of the time. He needs to call all pocket pair even against the half pot and not the 1/3. The only hands that he really needs to fold is basically like the really bad hands that has no equity, and then some ace X that doesn't have like backdoor flush draw. Even the ones with backdoor flush draw, I mean, we're always going to be calling with hands like ace 9 type of stuff, but all the rest is pretty, I would say pretty natural, if you can put it this way. All right, so let's take a look now on a, let's say 3 of spade turn. Again, like there's not really the small betting going on. It's mostly going to be betting. It's mostly going to be betting on the bigger side. What we get to see as well is that in general, on these type of board where the board is middling, right, we get to bet a bit higher frequency than on the higher boards, where we tend to be a bit more polarized on the blanks, right? Like we saw before. So we get to bet a bit more because again, like even a hand now like Jack 10, 10-9, Queen 10, like those hands are actually getting bet at a pretty high frequency because they want to be protecting quite a lot. Where if, let's say, you are on the you are on an ace-high board, for example, on ace-8 deuce rainbow. If you have like, I don't know, ace 10, I mean, you don't fear anything, right? I mean, like there's basically no turn card on ace-8 deuce rainbow that you are like not happy about. So basically, being more polarized in those situations makes a lot of sense. But in these type of situations where the equities are not as stable, again, like I said, just betting a bit more top pair type of hands makes a lot of sense. Also, we can go like hands like 9s, 8s. We can definitely still go for value here. He's going to have plenty of overcards that he's going to be calling. So like I do tend to like bet those more deliberately as well. And then hands like jacks, queens, kings, again, like those hands make a pretty good barrel candidate as they need more protection than a hand like aces, right? So betting hands like jacks, I would always bet that. I would aces, I mean, I would start mixing, play a more solid strategy versus better players and all that type of stuff. Now let's take a look into, let's say like a pretty coordinated turn. Again, like it's using like a mix of block and also of medium. It's also using a jam sometimes. You see that happening in polarized situation where let's say the board is like 10-7, let's say the board is like 9-8 deuce flush draw, right? And then the turn is a 4, but brings second flush draw. You see that like it's actually jamming like hands that needs quite a lot of protection but are still vulnerable and will hate like pretty much every run out basically. So like the more but it still needs to be like a pretty safe run out. Like it's not because it's super draw heavy that we just get to jam. It needs still to be safe somewhat basically. So yeah, like on a jack, let's say I'm going to be using mostly a 2/3 pot size bet here. I'm going to be betting hands like a good jack or better. So something like king jack, and then a hand like queen jack, I'm probably just going to be checking. Even betting a hand like jack 9 is a bit better than betting a hand like queen jack, just because of the fact that we have an added equity if we ever get jammed on. So a hand like queen jack would suck getting jammed on. So like jack 9 would be a bit better than queen jack, for example. And then we just bet a strong jack or better. So on the 3x, let's say 3 of spade. Just let me go back to jack. If we bet here and villain jams, yeah, jack 9 is calling. But again, like it's gonna be jamming like some draws, like it's jamming hands like jack 8, you know, like which villain doesn't even have pre-flop, you know, like hands like 8-7. And so like in theory, yes, but yeah, I mean, against the population, definitely no. I would probably just check Jack 9, bet like a strong Jack X or better, or even be a bit more polarized. So the 3 of spade. Yeah, so again, like it's using like the ones without showdown value first. So hands like ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack mostly get checked. And then we can start using like some like queen, jack, king, jack, even hands like king, queen type of stuff. Again, like the same concept kind of apply here where we're going to be betting like more spade. Like the spade combos are always getting bet, right? Because again, like villain, we block, villains float. So the spade combos always gets bet first. And then the other combos, I mean, we just don't bet, something like king, queen, and then we can start betting here. But I mean, we're going to have hands like jack 10, some 8, 9 suited. We're going to have hands like ace 4, ace 5 as well that we're going to be betting. So we're going to have some natural bluffs. So I would be under bluffing a bit in those like queen, jack, king, jack. I would bet all the spade combos. And yeah. So like those, again, like the offsuit, again, it's the same thing. Like what's common about all the combos of the offsuit broadways that's getting bet here, guys? Like on the 3 of spade here. Yes, exactly. Prefer spades. So like here, like if you're telling yourself like, oh, I need to be bluffing some hands like this, first of all, like just under bluff as well a bit. And also like favor spade, for example. And then let's say if the 3 of diamond, like again, it's gonna be the same concept, right? Like the first hand that is gonna be betting will be the flush draws. Right? So the flush draws without showdown value, again, like those are almost getting bet. Hands like 8-7, ace-7 are getting checked, right? Ace-king, I'm not really sure why it's actually betting more. But yeah, I would probably just check that as well. Check those showdown value type of hand, and then I would be betting a bit more like some of those lower ones. But what I wanted to say is that, first of all, yes, it's going to be betting diamonds. And then, not sure why it's... So yeah, so now it's going to be using the spade combos. And then it's going to be using also the spade combos and the diamond combos. And then the hard combos, I would assume that, you know, those are never getting bet here. And same thing with club. Yeah, so those are never getting bet. It's only betting hands like queen, jack. So like this is something that's super interesting that we have to keep in mind. Make sure you look at your blockers. So you always want to be bluffing the diamonds or the flush draw, and also the suits that bricked. So basically like the red, like the spade and the diamonds, or if it's like the heart here, you want to be betting hearts and spades, and then yeah. Now as far as August is saying we bet full 9s and 8s or bet call. I mean, I would definitely just, the thing is that like I would be more cautious here. Like if we bet here hands like 9s, I mean, like it would really depend on the player. Like if he jams, I think people will be like, I think they will have too strong of a jamming range here. So it would really go player dependent. I would really go into player dependent in order to barrel or not. You know, if I think that villain is super tight and all that, I'm probably just checking. Or and if I think villain is a bit better, we'll be floating quite a lot versus my flop bet and all that type of stuff. Then there's more value into betting the turn as well. All right, now let's take a look into a overcard turn. Again, like it's using some block and some bigger bets, but I would just tend to stick with the bigger size. And I mean, we have plenty of natural bluffs. We're gonna have hands like 8-9, ace jack, even hands like ace king, king, jack, jack nine type of stuff. So we had, and then flush draw. So we're gonna have plenty of natural bluffs as well. So we don't need those crazy bluffs. And then the middling portion, right, gets checked like nines, eights, sevens. I mean, it's only betting because it's betting small. So then I would just check them and then play a big bet or check strategy. And then also like it's betting like all the queen X. So like this, again, like this is a spot where we bet pretty aggressively, right? So like most of our top pair that we turn will mostly getting bet as well. So like I would probably just check a hand like queen nine suited, right, that we have. So the worst one, and then the rest I would probably bet. It's going to be the same thing with a king. Same thing, like it's basically betting range here, to be honest. Like, but like I would not bet range. I would just bet with a really high frequency with a big size. And then the checking range is pretty obvious. It's going to be hands like nines, eights, and then sixes type of stuff. And then the really, really bad hands like ace five of diamond, ace five of club type of stuff. And then on the ace of heart, it's again using the same strategy as blocking. Now, do you guys have more questions? I mean, we have to, like, I have other stuff that I want to like talk about, especially the turn, the river strategy after blocking the turn as well. Maria is asking, on the flop, our marginal hands doesn't want to bet because they have higher EV check and our overpair win the 85%. The villain's range want to bet big size. The EV we gain with exploit to bet range is more than to play GTO. Like in this situation, it's actually betting like at a pretty high frequency. Now the thing is that in most situations, like people will be overfolding once they start overfolding. So let's say like in a situation it bets like 50% or 55% of the time. I mean, of course, we're going to be playing a mixed strategy, and we're not going to be c-betting our entire range. It would be just way too much. But if you are betting something like 70, 80%, and then you actually node log that he actually overfolds like a small portion of his range, then what happens is that it's just going to naturally increase the c-betting frequency on the flop from going to 70 to 80 to 90 or 100. So basically, like, yeah. So we're not betting range to simplify our strategy. We're betting range because people will make mistake versus that and are making mistakes. They overfold versus that sizing. They overfold versus that strategy. They don't raise enough, and by them overfolding and all doing that type of stuff, then we just get to play a really high small bet frequency. Plus, the second thing that happens is that it simplifies our strategy, which is great. So you basically never use a block bet on a non-ace-high flush turn card? No, not really. Okay, so now let's just move on with the presentation. All right. So just 1 second, guys. I'm gonna set. All right. So yeah, so let's just go through because we talked about this already. So Queen 8 deuce. Yeah, so as we saw on blanks, the same concepts apply in both situations. Okay, on a flush turn, we could be using two types of strategies, blocking turn or betting our regular sizing. On king turns, we talked about it. We talked about that. Okay, now approaching the river on Queen 8 deuce, diamond, diamond, turn ace X. What to do when blocking on the turn? What to do when blocking turn on the river? I suggest using one sizing for our entire betting range on the turn. On the river, we can definitely have more than one sizing, and I usually stick with two. So what would you guys like? So take this situation, Queen 8 deuce, flush draw, turn is the ace X offsuit, we block. The river is, I don't know, the 4 that doesn't bring the flush. What two sizings would you guys use? If I would give you the choice. Yeah. So basically, like when you block the turn, the preferred sizing on the river will almost always going to be block again. So what we do is that we block the turn and then we block the river too. And now the second sizing is going to be a shove size, because I mean, when we use only one size on the turn, right? Let's say we have a hand like pocket eights that we block, and he calls, the river is whatever. Pocket eights actually wanted to bet bigger on the turn, so it actually lost some value. So blocking again doesn't really make sense. So those type of hands actually want to go in a big size, and that's where the jamming goes in. So using a block and then a jam makes a lot of sense. So yeah. Does anybody have questions about that? All right, doesn't seem like it. So let's go into Jimmy's advice. We want to understand how solvers approaches the game. Don't start playing like solvers. For example, Payoslo plays quite a bit on turn after range c-bet. We talked about that and the reasons behind it. Also, it is okay to give up on the turn or river in certain situations, even though you know this would be a good bluffing candidate. So it's one of my personal problems, in the sense that what I wanted to say is that, you know, like on those really dry boards, right, on ace, eight, deuce, rainbow, where you bet the flop, you bet the turn, and the board is really dry, and you bet like on the bigger side on the turn, and he calls again, like it's pretty obvious he's going to have like a top pair type of hand. So then we have to be under bluffing. We just have to be under bluffing, because most people, their range will be way too strong by the time they get to the river. So we just have to be more careful and then try to bluff like maybe our really best candidates, and then basically just under bluff as well. Andre Lux is saying, how do you split your range on the river? Basically, like a general guideline that you can use is that the best bluffing hand will always go into the big size. So the best blockers as a bluff, or the best candidate, the best bluffing candidate that you can have, will always go into the big size, because I mean, you put too much, you put a lot of money into the pot, right? And then for the bigger size, the smaller size, the bluffing hands that goes in that are basically like the worst hand. So like if you have like a busted flush draw that has like 8 high, it's not a great hand to bluff, right? Because I mean, we block some of his folds, but I mean, we have 8 high, so we want to be bluffing. So I would just put that in the block size, for example. So yeah, so I mean, you just have to tell yourself that it's okay to give up on turns or river, just because like a solver is like balanced in every way. I mean, doesn't mean that we want to play like that. We just have to understand that and adjust accordingly. Try to bet many types of different bluffs, so you will have potential bluffs on most runouts. One of the best examples I can give you is, let's say you are in a single raise pot or a 3-bet pot, and let's say the board is, I don't know, like the board is whatever, and the turn brings the flush, and villain bets again, and then on the river, a 4 to a flush comes. So like a lot of like bluffing hands that population will use will be like hands that has a flush draw, some type of flush draw on the turn, right? So when they get to the river and it's 4 to a flush, basically all of their bluffing hand actually got there on the river, so they don't have anything else. So in some situation, you have to like bluff hands that are quite uncomfortable or unnatural in certain situations, because on specific runouts, you need to have some bluffs as well. So as we saw, the comp sets are similar, and we can apply them in similar situations on different textures. Don't overcomplicate things. That's a really, really important point. Now, I have a quiz time before we get into the hand history review. So the quiz time here, my question is this, but I want you guys to, we just talked about it, but I want you guys to be thinking a bit deeper about it. So button opens, we 3-bet from the small blind, and he calls, board is 4-4 deuce rainbow, and we c-bet our entire range for a 50% size. Now the turn is an ace. What would be the size and what would be the frequency that we should be barreling the turn now? Okay. Okay, now my next question is this, guys. On 4-4 deuce rainbow against a full range c-bet, do you expect people to be like folding a lot of ace highs there? Okay, so does some of you guys want to change your answer now? Yeah, so let's take a look. So now on the 4-4 deuce rainbow turn ace, we're now checking about 87% of the time, and then we're basically not blocking anymore. We use a bigger size with a polarized range. Just because of the fact, like when you think about it on like queen 8 deuce, right, flush draw, villain will be folding hands like ace 5, ace 4, ace 3, right, that we talked about without the backdoor flush draws, or even with even with the backdoor flush draw, it was folding the smaller ones, right? So once we get to the turn, like we had double the amount of double the amount of the top pair that he had. Let me just check. Let me just pull out the sim 1 second, guys. I just want to know how many top pairs we have now. So yeah. All right. So top pairs. I have to put in, sorry, call, ace of spade. So which, let's just check here. It's the ace of heart. All right. So let's just take a look into the top pair. So out of position has 56 combos of top pairs. And we just 1 second, call. So yeah, so I mean, the thing is that like here, just 1 second. So against the, I mean, he folds a bit more. Yeah, so again, like Andre is saying, we have more top pair in absolute numbers, but yeah, as far as the percentages of our range, it's not that much more. So we have to be a bit more careful because on the flop here, like he never folds an ace, right? But on the other simulation where he has queen 8 deuce, right? And we actually bet, he was folding like some hands. So on this turn, on this type of turn where he's actually folding some ace-x, we can be really aggressive. And it's the same thing on the 10-7 deuce, for example. If we put it this way, where is the 10-7 deuce? Let me just open the 10-7 deuce here. The 10-7 deuce, again, he's going to be folding like some ace-x here, like ace 3, ace 4, ace 5, ace 6, some ace 8, some ace 9, where he never folds anything on the other one. So basically, yeah, so in this type of situation, well, like you just have to tell yourself, like in the situation where he folds some ace-x, right? We can be really aggressive with a block bet sizing, but in situations where he actually always calls ace-x and never folds, and this is true for all like the wheel draws, like the deuce deuce 4 4 4 deuce 5 5 3 type of stuff where villain will not be folding, we need to be checking quite a lot. So yeah. All right, so let's move on with the lab hand examples. Is David in the coaching here? Let's just take a look. Yeah, okay. Do you have a mic? All right. All right, can you talk?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
All right, great. So just want to know a bit of your thought process, and then we can talk about the hand.
Okay, so well, queens obviously in the small blind is going to be a 3-bet. My opponent seems kind of like a reg, but or maybe like on a better level of recreational.
Yep.
He folds a lot to 3-bets and opens like 41% from the button. So basically, obviously, I 3-bet him. On the flop, small C-bet, which seems standard. And then on the turn is where I get into problems because of not having the solver experience. I'm not sure. The jack, I mean, it seems to me like I have a decent amount of jacks, as does he. I went for my standard sort of sizing for the barrel. But in retrospect, I think possibly a check would have been better. When I was playing, my thought process was that he might have some ace-king here, but then after looking at it again, ace-king is almost always a 4-bet pre-flop, so that takes out a lot of combos that he could call the turn with.
No, of course. The thing is that, like, personally, like you said that he was a recreational, right?
I'm not sure whether he's a recreational. He seems sort of on the kind of regish side, but since this is 10 NL, he would be, even as a reg, he's probably not, going to be amazing.
No, of course. The problem with this is that, like, we're kind of overplaying our hand, right? Like, when the jack is there, like, I mean, he's going to have plenty of jack. He's going to have hands like king jack off, ace jack off. We're still going to have those as well, but it's a spot where we cannot go thinly for value in the sense that, like, you told me that he's overfolding, right? Versus
yeah, I have the stats here, and he's opening 41% from the button and folding 60%.
So that, what does that tell you about his range?
Well, it's going to be quite strong.
Exactly. So his range is going to be on the stronger side, right? So on this turn, specifically, to be honest, like I would be a bit more polarized here for sure. Like, I mean, queens, like, just he's gonna have so many jack X here. We're trying to target hands like 10-9, pocket nines, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
But I mean, like, we're out of position, and then the board will change quite a bit as well. Like, what if a 9 is a straight, but like a 7, or, I mean, it's not going to change. I mean, even if it's an ace or a king, and we're not thrilled about it. So I would just be a bit more polarized here and bet some of my jack X, and then tend to check here. Also, we don't block like queen jack suited here. Like, he shouldn't have queen jack off. But I mean, he's a recreational, right. But we don't even block one combo of queen jack suited. Also, once we bet and he calls, like, check calling here, what do you expect him to be bluffing?
Well, again, I mean, in retrospect, looking at it, I don't expect him to be bluffing a lot. At the time, I was probably thinking if he can have like 9-8 suited, pocket nines, he might. But then again, in retrospect, I think he'll probably just check those back and hope to hit.
Of course. I just want to ask everybody here, like, what do you guys think about this spot, like bluff catching here? In your games, what do you guys think about it? Yeah, so I mean, like, if he has a bluff, like, I don't know, like king, queen, right? Like, we're kind of blocking his bluff as well. So pocket nines, like pocket nines, okay. But like, is he really betting that, like shoving, like shoving the river? I think people way under bluff. He's going to have a lot, of jack X plus, like, he's calling hands like 10-9 suited as well, right? On the turn. Like, so he's going to have some 10X as well. And we don't block hands like queen 10 suited as well.
Right. Yeah, so, I think I didn't notice at the time when I was playing, I didn't notice that my suits.
Yeah, but even then, like, he's going to end up like with the offsuit versions as well. So like, he's going to have hands like king jack off, ace jack off. That's a lot of combos. Like, that's quite a lot of combos as well. So he's not gonna have bluff. So we just have to overfold here. I think the bet on the turn is quite ambitious. I would be checking, and I mean, on the river, I think it's definitely a fold. We, like, in those situations where, like, think about it. Okay, is it hard to find bluffs here?
Yeah, it is actually hard for him to find bluff, probably.
Exactly. Does he have a lot of value?
Mostly he has value. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just those spots where even like if you ended up here and he showed you 8-9, right? Or pocket nines, I think it would be a losing call over the long run, of course. Like those are the stuff, like if you stop making those calls on the river, like you will be saving a lot of money.
Yeah, after looking at this hand, that's what I realized probably being my biggest leak.
No, of course. I mean, it's some leagues that like everybody, but I mean, betting queens on the turn, like August said, I don't think it's a huge mistake. I mean, queens, we have a bit more added equity with the gut shot, right? But a hand like kings and aces, I would always check. Yeah, I mean, it's just a growth spot in general, to be honest. Like, I think I would be a bit more. Polarized on the turn. Also, given the fact that you told me that he's gonna be a bit tighter and with a stronger range, just because of the fact that he overfolds versus c-bet and all that. I think the flop also we should go with something like half pot. I think this like 1/3 pot is not like if the board was really connected, like Jack 10-9 flush draw, right? Where there are many turns that like we won't love, then I wouldn't mind going small with a polarized range. But on this specific board, I think going something like half pot is fine. Even I don't hate the smaller sizing, to be honest, just because of the board. Like any 7, any 9, any queen is not great. But I think that like on this specific board, going half pot will be better.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it was a super interesting hand. I think the bet on the turn is a bit ambitious, and then the river call is really ambitious. Like if you save those river calls, I think you're going to be printing a lot of money. Thanks for sharing their hand, though.
Yeah, thank you so much for reviewing it.
All right, no problem. All right, is Matthias still in? Yeah, I'm probably check calling turn and then check folding river. Is Matthias K in the coaching? Okay, Matthias, let me just check in the chat. No, he's not here. All right, so I'm just going to be reviewing his hand here. Just 1 second. Okay. So he opens. No, so he 3-bets player 4, which is in the cutoff. So he's in the small blind versus cutoff. He 3-bets to 12 big blinds and villain calls. He goes with a half pot c-bet here, which I think is okay. I mean, I wouldn't mind going 1/3 with a high frequency bet, or going half pot as well. I'm not, to be honest, like I'm not a big, I wouldn't mind either strategy, to be honest, as long as he bet pretty aggressively here. I mean, we're not going to have 7s, we're not going to have 5s, but we're going to have a lot of the over pairs, also the ace queen suited, king queen suited that he's going to have as well. So I think we can still be pretty aggressive here since the board is pretty disconnected as well. On this turn, again, like we can use 2 strategies. I don't mind the block. Here, just because with the block, with having the fact that we bet half pot on the flop, with the block, we still have like an under pot size bet left on the river. So on the river, he has like 61 big blinds into a pot of 82 bigs. So going something like block 30% here, I think is the right approach. Betting bigger, I think the thing is that, like, again, like we saw earlier, we have to check quite a bit. So we're going to be polarized when betting here, but I would just stick with a 1/3 pot strategy and checking something like 75% of the time. And then on the river, this is where it gets pretty close. If I had aces with a diamond, I'm definitely shoving. We can also argue the fact that having kings is also pretty good because we block ace queen, right? So we block the flush which should be like, I would say, one combo. Shouldn't really have king nine suited, maybe sometimes. So like having the king is not that great, just because, I mean, we block basically king jack of diamonds, we block some king nine that he could potentially have. We're not even sure he has that. So yeah, I would much rather having the ace of diamond. With the ace of diamond, I'm definitely jamming, but here I think it's pretty thin. I mean, I would have to take a look into the player. It seems that it's anonymous here because it's player 2, player 3. I'm not really sure because he's not there to explain this thought process. But again, like I think the shove on the river is okay. If it was button, I mean, versus the button, I think it would also be fine. He's gonna have hands like queen jack, queen nine suited as well, type of stuff. He's gonna have like more ace queen off, king queen off also that he's gonna have. Once the ranges start getting a bit tighter, the offsuit stuff goes out the window. So like, I mean, of course, if you're playing like smaller stakes and all that, people will show up with offsuit combos as well, but they should not really, to be honest. Even against the cutoff, like ace queen off would be mixed between 4-bet and call, but like once you start to be getting like in middle position and under the gun, it starts to get folded a lot more. So yeah, so against the button, I'm feeling much more confident here because he's gonna have more queen X to actually call. But against the cutoff, I think it's a bit closer, to be honest. So like I'm kind of whatever in order, like on the shove. I like the block on the turn. On the river, I don't mind the shove, to be honest, with the diamond. But yeah, I think he played his hand fine. Let me just take a look. Yeah, so I have two hands of. I'll just do Pablo because he's not there. Matthias. So I'll just review Pablo's hands and then answer last questions, and then we can wrap things up. Let me just get one sip of water. All right. Is Pablo in the coaching? I don't think so. Let me just check. No, he's not. But he sent me this. And I thought it was a pretty interesting hand because it covers some interesting topic in the sense that button opens, it's three-handed, so we're gonna disregard that. We're gonna think it's a regular game. So button 3-bets, we are in the big blind and we 3-bet. So button opens, we are in the big blind and we 3-bet and he calls. The flop is queen 6-5, and he goes with a 1/3. I think it's a board where we can start finding some checks at lower stakes. Like when you're playing higher, I think that incorporating more mixing strategies is fine. At lower stakes, like 50, 25, 100, I think going on the more aggressive, small, betting high frequency strategy is the right approach. So if I were to play, basically at 500 or 1K or whatever it is, I would tend to play more mixed strategies than if I were to be playing at 500, at 50 zoom, for example. And in the big blind, the problem is that our 3-betting range is much different than the small blind. So if we were in the small blind, for example, I would definitely use a pretty high frequency c-bet strategy here with a small size. Just because we're going to be 3-betting some hands like 5s, we're going to be 3-betting some hands like 6s, we're going to have hands like all the good queen X and all that. Here, we're going to be calling hands like queen king queen off sometimes. We're going to be 3-betting. There's going to be some hands like queen 9 suited that we're going to be calling. We're still going to be 3-betting quite aggressively, but our range is a bit different. So like we never have 5s, we never have 6s because we're just going to be calling. So in these type of situations, even on ace-high boards, like let's say the board is like ace-7-6, those are the type of boards where we cannot just blindly c-bet range anymore. we just have to use mixed strategies. So like these type of board where like if you are playing at lower stakes, like 5, 10, 25, 50, I wouldn't really think about it and bet a high frequency with a small bet, but I wouldn't mind here, since he's playing like 200, using a kind of a mixed strategy here, to be honest. But I don't mind that he goes for the high frequency C bet here. Now his question was on the turn, like we have to think about what type of hands we want to be bluffing with some showdown value. So first of all, you have to look at your blockers, right? The fact that we have the king of diamonds is not great because we block some hands like king 10 of diamonds or king jack of diamonds that actually call the flop with. Again, we have ace king, so we're ahead of those. It's not about the actual hand that we have. It's just about like, if we think about our blockers, that type of stuff, we don't really want to have a diamond in it. So if we want to be bluffing a hand like ace king, I wouldn't mind having a club, and also I wouldn't mind even not having a heart is fine, because I mean with a hand like ace king we can still bet for like basically value on the turn. If it were to bet, I would assume that it's betting some hands like ace king on the turn, but again, like I would be betting a hand like this. I would be using clubs first, and then having a diamond is not really great. So also we have some showdown value. We're going to have hands like 7-8. We kind of lack natural bluffs as well, in the sense that we're going to have some hands like 7-8, but we don't 3-bet that all the time, or even hands like 8-9. But other than that, we're going to have some flush draws. We don't really 3-bet also hands like ace jack off or ace 10 off in the big blind. So we get to the turn with not that many like offsuit stuff containing only one heart. So that makes me want to think that potentially having a heart here with the ace is fine, and we can definitely be bluffing at some frequency, but I would choose maybe a hand that like has the ace of heart and the king of clubs, for example, something like that. Or even ace king of club, for example, type of stuff before having that. I think just betting all of the ace king is a bit overdoing it. We can still be betting hands like king jack of club type of stuff, or hands like jack 10 as well, or 7-8 that also unblock some of his floats that he's going to have. Also with ace king, we're going to have some showdown value. So also people will not be betting, like people will let us get to showdown a bit too much. If you're playing at lower stakes, so you still have some EV and checking and just get to showdown versus a hand like ace 10, ace jack type of stuff that he doesn't want to be betting, and all that type of stuff. So checking, I think on the turn is fine. Having the diamond, I don't mind betting with other suits as well. And against the half pot bet here, I mean, just folding is totally fine. So that covers pretty much what I wanted to be talking about. Do you guys have any other questions? So Stefan is asking, regarding the king hand, can it be a reasonable shove versus all the ace queen, queen jack combos, especially the ones that have the diamond, make the villain overthink since they could have a diamond blocker? Yes, I do think that it has some merit into shoving with a diamond, but the thing is that like, he needs to have the offsuit combos in order to have one diamond, like a diamond blocker. So like the only hand I could see is ace queen off that he can have. So yes, I could definitely see them calling with ace queen off with the ace of diamond, of course. But other than that, we hold the king of diamond, and he should never have a hand like queen jack off. That would be way too loose. So yeah. Simon is asking, I've been looking at some deep stack hands and saw some merit in having a big flop sizing. What's your thoughts? Yes, I do think it has merits. In general, I would stick with, but the thing like big sizing, I would stick with something like 70% pot or something like that. I would not go crazy and start over betting and just huge sizing. There's going to be more mixing going on when deep, because most boards are not as favorable when you hold the hand like an overpair to just be putting all the money in. So there's going to be more mixing going on. And then on the flop, when we do mix, we don't use like a smaller sizing. We can use like a 50% or 75% size. Johnny, why does Pio like to block river after we block turn? Just because like once we block the turn on ace-x, we block the turn at a really high frequency. That means that we're going to have a lot of medium strength hands. So, I mean, we're still blocking like on the turn ace-x, we're still blocking hands like ace-6 suited, right? Ace-8 suited, ace-9 suited. So all the medium strength hands are still getting bet. So you get to the river with a bunch of medium, like you get to the river with a bunch of medium strength hands as well. I mean, good hands, but not great hands, like some weaker, like top pair type of hands that cannot really jam for value, but can definitely be worth a small bet as well. So most of your range is just medium strength because you're going to be betting hands like second pair, hands like kings, and that type of stuff. Jimmy, what's an average fold to c-bet in position in 3-bet pot for flop or turn? Does it differ for out of position? I mean, the thing is that like when you are out of position, you need to be calling a tight range versus the 3-bet. So you need to be 4-betting at a pretty high frequency, and also you need to be calling a tight range. So it's going to be a bit easier to defend. Because your range will be stronger. So I assume that the versus c-bet, it also depends. I mean, it also depends on the board texture. Like if you call a 3-bet and the board is ace, jack, deuce, I mean, you're going to get to fold versus a c-bet like, I don't know, like 60% of your range, just because the fact that the board is really, really bad for you. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like I would say anywhere, like, okay, so a flop c-bet, I don't know, like it depends of how wide the people is, that like the person is actually calling 3-bets and all that. But I would say anywhere from like around 40, I would say. And then turn, we can start folding a bit more, maybe around 50 or something like that. Or maybe 40 to like anywhere between 40 and 45. I think the flop is a bit lower. So like anywhere from like 35 to 40 and then 40 to 45 the turn. The thing is that we have to take into account also villain's range and all that if he's under bluffing. Lee is asking, when we double block, does it protect itself with some strong hands? Yes, usually are the hands that we block also villain's calling range. So like if you have a hand like aces, right? That can go definitely in the checking range or the double block, because I mean, we block is ace-x, right? That he's going to call the jam with, or hand like ace queen. But if you have a hand like pocket eights where you have middle sets, I'm blocking everything, that would just go into the pure like jamming range. Butcher had some good videos this month about button versus under the gun 3-bet pots, when to c-bet and when to check raise. Great. Butcher is really good. So if you guys have questions about this, just check his videos as well. Okay, so let's just wrap things up. So MMA's coaching is going to be about 3-bet pot, button versus cutoff. Super interesting spot that people play pretty badly. And it's going to be Friday the 22nd at 8 p.m. CET. Your guys going to be covering the pre-flop fundamentals, all the information needed to approach the pre-flop game, the flop fundamentals once we get to the flop, and how to approach it correctly. As far as next month's topic, it's going to be 3-bet pot part 2. It's going to be on the Saturday 6th at 8 p.m. CT. So we're going to be covering how to approach turn when checking. So when turn goes check, check, when you're facing a bet and all that. We're also going to check into some turn barreling in position. We'll be covering how to approach river when turn goes check, check. There's some cool stuff that we can do there. And also, we're going to take a look into other strategies like mixing on the flop. Z-Snake is asking, what flush draw do you check raise on the flop? As a like, if the flop has like an ace, a king on it, don't know what to do when they call. Like they don't fold turn. Yes, I mean, the thing is that we're going to be a bit more polarized on the turn once they do call. because bet folding in some situation is not great, and we're going to be facing some jams. But I'm not sure that I understand your question. Yeah. Any webinar as the in position pre-flop caller? What do you mean? Like when you cold call a let's say under the gun opens and you call on the button? Okay, so you're asking to cover button versus small line 3-bet pot, and we cover the button strategy, right? Versus different lines, versus mixed strategies and bet. I mean, we could definitely do that if there are more people interested in that. I can definitely write it down, and yes, that's definitely possible. You know what? Like I can take your suggestion, and I'm gonna add it to the next month's topic, if that's fine. Because I mean, we're gonna be covering a whole bunch of stuff, so I can add it in there. Is that cool with you guys? All right, so this is good. I'm always open to suggestions and all that. Chris is asking, would love some SRP content about that out of position as PFR. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely do some stuff like that. I mean, this is a really important situation that happens quite a lot. But yeah, I do believe I made a video about that, but or else it's on my list, so it might come up in the future. But I'm gonna be definitely making a video about that, as the out of position, as the PFR versus cold calls and stuff like that. All right, guys. Okay, great webinar. Thank you. Do you play at the casino in Montreal on the island? No, I don't. I play at the Playground Poker Club when I play live. It's better. I do play sometimes at the casino, but yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this coaching. Again, I mean, if you have any questions, write them on the forum. I try to answer as much as I can. Hope you guys had some fun, and then we got to hang out and learn some new stuff. So I'm going to wish you guys luck. Good luck at the tables, and yeah, take care, guys. Have a good rest of the weekend.